Survival thinking is designed to answer one urgent question. What do I need to do to get through this moment? When safety, housing, income, health, relationships, or emotional stability feel threatened, the mind naturally narrows its focus. Immediate relief becomes more important than long-term design. That response is not foolish. It can be protective, adaptive, and necessary. The problem begins when a temporary survival strategy becomes the permanent architecture of a life or system. In survival mode, decisions are measured against the next hour, the next bill, the next conflict, or the next crisis. The future becomes harder to evaluate because the present feels louder. That can lead to reactive choices, borrowed capacity, ignored maintenance, unclear boundaries, and repeated trade-offs that solve today while making tomorrow harder. Survival thinking is not the absence of vision. It is vision compressed by pressure. Legacy thinking expands the question. What will this decision teach? What pattern will it establish? What will remain after the immediate problem is solved? What burden am I passing forward? And what foundation am I building? Legacy thinking does not ignore the present. It sees the present as part of a larger story. It asks how today's choices can protect dignity, create stability, preserve truth, and increase the capacity of the people who come next. But people cannot be expected to think long-term while every part of life still feels unsafe, unstable, or depleted. Restoration creates the capacity for a wider time horizon. It rebuilds enough safety, clarity, identity, support, regulation, and hope for a person to consider more than immediate survival. That is why legacy thinking is not simply better planning. Sometimes the conditions that make planning possible have to be restored first. Legacy thinking becomes real through reform. If a family values stability, that value has to become communication, routines, boundaries, and responsible preparation. If an organization values people, that value has to become workload design, leadership practice, policy, and accountability. Legacy is not only what we say we care about, it is what our repeated decisions and structures make possible for other people. Redemption allows survival experience to become wisdom instead of remaining a permanent operating system. We do not have to deny what it took to survive. We can keep the courage, adaptability, discernment, and strength while reforming the patterns that no longer belong in the future. Legacy thinking asks how pain can become instruction, how recovery can become structure, and how one restored life can reduce the burden carried by the next generation. The goal is not to shame survival thinking or pretend everyone has equal freedom to make long-term choices. The goal is to notice when crisis logic is still directing decisions after the immediate threat has passed. Survival thinking asks, how do I get through today? Legacy thinking adds, what am I building through the way I get through today? That is the movement of R3. Restore the person, reform the pattern, redeem the experience into a future that carries less harm and more wisdom. This concludes the first R3 Framework playlist sequence. Subscribe to Grace Legacy Academy and continue exploring the frameworks, pathways, and practical tools that support restoration, reform, and redemption.